Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to go?
I think so.
A lot of pressure now.
Mhm.
Josh.
I'm renaming it so it says Josh.
I'm not Josh.
It's Adam.
I get so confused by you guys. Your name.
How do you confuse them?
Because it's always been Josh and Adam.
But we don't look alike.
I know.
At all?
And he's an A and the other guy's a J.
Tove also thinks we look alike.
What?
Oh, I don't think you look alike.
We thought you
I
were-
think it's just like, because she said.
We
it's
thought you
Josh
were,
and Adams.
it's always just Josh and Adam.
I'm insulted.
You should be. That was so rude. I'm sorry.
Why isn't Adam and Josh?
I don't know.
You can
Since
say
A, since A comes before J.
We'll live. That's okay. All right. So everyone knows I'm out,
Definitely Josh.
just so we're clear. And so obviously Courtney asked that we, and Jordan asked that we put together some pointers on how to get approved for, a condominium, get your client approved and qualified and through the process. So put together a quick little slideshow. I'll send it to everyone after, but nothing crazy, just a couple key points to keep in mind when you're shopping around with the client, and I'll take you through all of them. So the first thing and the most obvious thing is just the debt to income ratio. And this all goes back to, for anyone that was here last time, the whole scenario worksheet that we put together for all of our clients, right? Because every condo that you're going to visit with a client is going to have a different HOA, whether it's a monthly dues or quarterly dues or whatever it is, whatever the regular dues are, those are going to heavily skew the DTI with respect to the loan. The reason being that they come off the top before the principal and interest because they're not spread over 30 years. So it's a large factor, right? When you're trying to shop around with the client. So just something to be cognizant of. Similarly, taxes and insurance, it depends what kind of condo it is, what they're insuring, what you're responsible for insuring. All these things come into play. And the biggest piece of advice that I could give anyone is just text Josh or I or anybody in their office with the property address and just say, does this one specifically check out? Because it's very easy for us to plug it into our calculator and just vet it for you.
Do that before you show it.
Or if you say even what's the max HOA, that I could, that we should be looking at, like if maybe it crosses a threshold of $800 a month and then everything, the DTI gets thrown off. So that's my biggest piece of advice with that. And that's the most obvious. Is that your phone?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay. Next, and this has come up in the chat, is the budget. And this comes up a lot. And just like things to keep in mind, HOAs were originally, created to bring communities together and organize people within the same building or community or whatever it is, right? But the issue is with HOAs, a lot of times is they're run by everyday people, right? Not people that are in this business, right? And they're not so cognizant of how important it is to get the budget done and approved and signed off on and in place, right, in a timely manner for a given year. I currently have a deal that just keeps getting kicked because the HOA had a proposed budget, but not an approved budget for the year of 2022. We're in March, they still don't have an approved budget for the year of 2022. So just things that you want to get ahead of, do you have a budget? Is it in place already? Is it signed off on by the board, right? Things like that are really important.
Are you going to have an example of what to look at when you have the budget in front of you, like what to look at to make sure?
I mean, it's not even just that there is a budget. So there's two things. There has to be a budget and then they have to have 10%. So that's like point one is going to be that they have to have 10% at a minimum has to be towards reserves. Otherwise, that's going to create a situation where the bank's going to ask the client to put way more down, right? So you want to look for condominiums where they have 10% at a minimum.
Where does it say it on the?
So I can go to our chat, or Tove sent a couple over. So it's usually at the bottom, right? And all you're doing is dividing the total budget or the reserve amount by the total budget. So just those two numbers, taking them, and it has to equal over 10%.
Okay.
Very simple. And I can do it for you too, if you're having issues. Other like little quirks right, to look out for in the budget. And not very common at all, but if the HOA is receiving 10% of its budgeted income from like commercial parking, that's problematic for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And then point 3 was to me the most important because it's come up a couple of times, especially when you're in the beginning of the year. You just want to make sure that they have an actual budget for that year and not some proposal.
Quick question in regards to like your budget itself, because I do see a lot of HOAs and maybe it's like later in the year, they actually have the reserves there
Mhm.
because some HOAs, what they do, if nothing happens throughout the year, so that reserve money come
Just carry
December,
over, you're saying?
well, they don't carry it over, they just kind of put it into another project. They don't leave it. As a
Yeah,
reserve.
so I mean, it's just, that's the problem, right? So the average person isn't cognizant of what Fannie and Freddie are looking for, right, with respect to the budget. So they're just saying, oh, we have this money and we're gonna go spend it. Well, that's problematic for people who are trying to buy within the community. Right, because then they're gonna have to put all this money down. So
But do you see it, do you see more? What question?
you're saying the lack of reserves?
Well, do you see? Like towards the end of the year, like it's easier to close a condo because they actually put the reserves in there, or is it just like?
It just has
It's
to
just
do
the
it to me.
association.
It's more likely that it's just the people in charge have decided to do whatever they want to do and they're not organized. It's
Yeah.
really, I mean, it's not
I think
any more
that's what it is.
complicated than
Yeah.
that. It's just a bunch of people who have their own lives. Their main job is not being on this board, and more than likely they just haven't gotten around to it or, aren't like paying attention to this, all the time. So
So that reserve number can change all the time.
it can, but you want to see it in the budget. So you're not looking for the actual reserves, you're looking for,
I'm setting it aside.
yes.
Them setting that.
Yeah.
amount aside.
Yeah. So next is the questionnaire. There's nothing crazy to it. So like, to me, again, the problem that people run into is basically, it's an HOA, they're everyday people, everyone's passing the buck, right? They have their own lives, and usually nobody wants to put in the time to kind of fill out the questionnaire. Making sure that it's ordered and identifying who's going to fill it out for you, right? Or who's in charge of that, or whose responsibility that's supposed to be, and staying on them is to me like a major key when it comes to HOAs. Also flushing out whether or not there's any litigation, right? And making sure you have the contact information for the attorney who's handling that litigation, because they'll oftentimes need to provide some sort of documentation, whether it's the court complaint or just a letter saying that, the insurance company has already said that they're going to defend the case, things like that. So just getting in front of things. To me, HOA, getting a condo through is more about doing the work ahead of time, right? And we're doing that work for you, but also just, for your own sake, so you have that in the back of your mind. Just always good to know.
So the questionnaire comes from the lender?
Yes, but just oftentimes, right, so the lender, it's sent by my office or the lender directly, right? And what happens is, in my experience, is it'll go to some general mailbox or, to somebody who's not really doing, they're not responsible for it. And so just identifying who that person is in advance, whether it's the president and, that person's, who knows where they are, right? And so just like, flushing that out ahead of time, I think is important. Or if there's litigation, just flushing out who the attorney is, right? And getting that information in advance, just so everything can be done in a timely manner. Because from what I see, other than, it's really with the budget, it's the reserves, and with the questionnaire, it's the litigation. So you just want to get in front of those two things for the most part. Those are the two most common issues. So just like kind of doing the work up front and identifying it and saying, we know we're going to have this problem, and right, we want to get ahead of it and we need this information.
Can I ask a question? I had
Yeah.
an issue with one of my buyers, and I knew the building actually had the reserves,
Mhm.
so she could have gone less in regards to percentage wise, but it turns out, I had a conversation with the listing agent, and there's an investor who owns like 20 some odd units.
Yeah.
there. So she told me we had to go 20% down because of that particular investor. Because, yeah, that's what she said, because the building is basically like red flagged
Okay,
If something happens to that person.
got it. It's
then-
high risk.
Yeah, it's high risk.
Got it.
So how do you get around that? Is there?
You
a
don't.
way?
No. You don't.
You do what you're told.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, right, is that somebody's lending the client money, right? And they're gonna create whatever rules that they need to create in order to tolerate the amount of risk for a given project. So if somebody owns the majority of the building and that person, like you're saying, like if that person declares bankruptcy or something, right? And you're saying the whole building would run the risk of going under, it's understandable when, you know. So it's all very fact specific, but no, there's nothing unfortunately that you can do about it.
Yeah, we're working
Yeah,
on
What's
it.
up?
Do you know if like third party management companies like Davenport or Castle Group, do they typically have authority to fill out the questionnaire, or is that still related more towards like the president?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes they give their employees the authority. I think it's probably also like giving an educated guess, but I believe it's the board that gives the authority to the management or not,
Okay.
right? So they're kind of working together to
Right.
dictate who's gonna do what, so.
Okay.
Okay, where was I?
Yeah.
No, I know, I just don't know what 3 says off the top of my head.
Oh.
Oh, it's a good thing. So a lot of times, some of the conventional lenders that I work with on my end, they'll have like a database of buildings where they've already done deals, basically. So almost like saying, you can even ask me in advance, hey, has this building previously been approved by the lender? Because that makes everything easy. They've already done all their diligence on the building, and it's just a smooth sale from there. So there's certain buildings and certain lenders that create like a database, and then that makes everything smooth sailing and easy.
Oh, that's neat.
Do you do that where you have a dad?
Yeah, I have lenders that have their own database, like, you know,
Oh,
wholesale
okay.
mortgage has a database, yeah. That's our favorite lender for conventional stuff, so. Yeah, that makes things easier. And then other things, this is like, just like for your own personal knowledge to look out for with the appraisal and the condo, right? They're not just looking at the unit, they're comparing the common areas, right? And comparing those common areas that the residents have the right to use to the common areas of similar buildings,
Oh,
right?
I
So
didn't know
that
that.
all factors into an appraisal, not just the unit, it matters, you know, what the amenities are, all those things come into play. So you want to keep that in mind when you're showing people around and, you know, considering whether or not something's
Like,
gonna
indoor
appraise.
pool is better,
Yeah. All that stuff matters, the gym, you know, everything, what kind of condition it's in, yeah, all of
You
it.
guys still do do you still do a survey for a condo?
So the survey for a condo is considered taken care of by the declaration that's recorded of record, right? And because it gives like the layout of each unit within the declaration by law. I know it's brief, but I mean, unless you guys have any other questions, those are the main points with respect to condominiums and loans, as far as I'm concerned. Go.
I do.
Yes,
In terms of the percentage down,
yeah,
as long as the reserves are 10%, does it matter if the client wants to just put 10% down? Because there's a lot of pushback to putting
yeah,
20% down, especially since money is still relatively cheap.
Yep.
Even with the interest rates going up.
no, the answer is that there's not. So keep in mind that these are Fannie and Freddie loans, so conventional loans, right? Non-conventional, non-QM lenders can create whatever rules that they want to create, right, on an individualized basis. But this is your conventional loan that they're looking for 10% reserves, and then the client can theoretically, right, unless the condo has something specific, maybe like it's a right of first refusal or something like that, or requires board approval on the sale, right? Those things all make a difference, but you know, as far as the lender's concerned, no restrictions on the down payment.
Okay.
What if I'm about to list a condo?
Yes,
Could I hand you the budget and or ask you if you could look
Yeah,
to see if,
100%,
okay, because I'm.
everything, yes.
And then, because I could direct like buyers to you, like say,
Yeah.
oh, I'll only let you, like you
Yeah.
buy my condo if you work with Dr. Mortgage.
Somebody just did
Because
that.
they already have approval.
I think Juan did that for some reason.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, on the deal, yeah,
okay, yeah.
yeah, you could definitely do that.
I'm just curious.
Just coincidentally, I think he did that yesterday.
When it comes to triggering a full versus a
I heard.
limited review.
Yes,
Now, that's really that 10% for that reserve, right? That just triggers.
yes,
that?
pretty much, yeah.
All right, so.
Right, because they have these baseline criteria,
mm,
right? And if you pass the baseline criteria, then you're eligible for the limited review as opposed to, right, if you're not passing all the criteria, then they're
So
gonna
it's funny,
skip
because
it.
sometimes the HOA requires, I don't know if it's the HOA, depending on what the broker agrees.
Yep.
But because they know they don't have the reserves, they'll ask for 25%.
Yes, very
Now,
common,
that 25%, is that 25% for a second home, or is it just because it's a condo?
because, I mean, it's not because, it's because they know that they don't have the reserves and that they're not gonna,
So you can't do 20%, it has to be 25.
it's typical that it's 25, yeah.
It's typical that it's
Yeah,
25, so limit review or limited review. So can you just explain what the limited review is as opposed to like a full? It's just.
It's just a more in-depth process on the lender's side. They're just digging into things a little bit deeper. We don't handle those per se,
Mhm.
right? That's external third-party process. But again, they're just diving into the budget, right? And the questionnaire and just making sure that everything's kosher.
So in a limited review, they just alleviate the budget and the.
Well, alleviate it, but they're
Not
not
alleviate,
like,
but they just don't
yeah,
dig into
it's
it.
not problematic.
So
right?
they, okay, because I'm always trying to figure out why is it like, okay, what do they leave out? Is it just because you have more skin in the game? They're like, all right, this guy's taking a little.
Pretty
more
much,
risk.
it's all a
So-
risk assessment.
Okay.
Yeah. That's all it is.
And does that affect the approval timing? I
It
mean, do you
does,
need to
yes.
Extend it?
You don't
past the
necessarily
30
need to,
days?
but it is common
What was
that
the
it's gonna take a
question?
longer time.
How-
As far as like, if you have to do a full review of the condo, if that takes more time, I mean, naturally, it takes more time, but everything's a factor, a function of whether or not the HOA is responsive and, there's so many different factors that come into play.
So what would you suggest if they're doing a closing date? What should they go 45 days out on condos?
Yeah, but that's different, right? So now if I'm putting myself in your guys' shoes, right, and somebody's not looking to, maybe they want to close in 30 days, or they're saying they want to close in 30 days, and then you're playing the game of, we're just gonna close our eyes and extend when we get there. So there's so many different things, right? Because everybody has their own role to play, and all the HOAs have their own rules, and the lender has its own rules, and you guys have your own stuff going. So it's just everyone's kind of, you got to look out for yourself. I mean, it's not worth. Would I recommend 45 days? Sure, but would I recommend losing a deal over, not closing on time or not putting on the contract 30 days? No.
So
I'm just putting myself in your shoes. I'm not recommending you do
So I know this is
anything.
based off the conventional ones, but just to kind of confirm, FHA pretty much is, there's no way going with FHA.
No, so the FHA thing is like this weird mythical thing that people talk about, and the reason is that boards, you're just assuming that the person isn't as trustworthy from a credit perspective,
Okay.
right? That's all it's saying.
Okay.
So when people say no FHA, this and that, it's just saying
And some
they don't
condos,
trust the client.
and some condos are FHA approved and some are not.
Yeah.
Do you have, could we
It's
reach out to
also
you
a
and
list, yeah.
a list?
They keep
Okay, so
track,
if you guys need to check. Because you could check and then it is FHA approved and you could go to the person, and that's listing it and say, guess what? They might not even know that it's FHA approved. They might take your offer because now they know it's FHA approved and it'll go through.
But as
We'll
far
just
as
always
like
assume that they're
the
not.
listing agent saying, FHA, no FHA or anything like most of the time, it just has to do with the board doesn't believe that you have enough money or credit worthy or. So, are those all messages or Slack?
No, it's Slacks.
Okay,
It's Jordana.
From the front room.
enjoy.
Yes, slacking me.
Anything else? That's kind of all I got.
No, I like that you guys are close though. The questions.
We're always reachable. I mean,
The 40-year recertification,
yes.
is that any part, I know obviously we want to figure out if there's any assessments, but can that possibly hinder a approval process mortgage wise?
Oh, yeah, 1000%, especially after what happened in Surfside, yeah.
Mhm.
Everyone's looking for it, right? And it has to do with insurability, right? And the lenders are also looking out for it, so, because nobody wants to be involved in anything like that, so definitely matters. Yeah, they'll shut you down. I mean, a lot of lenders now will just pass on it if you don't have the proper certification, so.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Does any-
Just in time.
Does anybody online have any,
Second I got here, I'm
For
like,
sure.
does anybody online have any questions that were not answered, or just curious about anything?
What about going
Answer. Thank you.
like price as far as like putting an offer on a condo?
What do you
Like
mean?
the same, you just have
Wait,
to
what?
pay
Say that
cash.
again?
Like,
Yeah.
Putting over on like a conventional loan.
Put over whatever you want.
Yeah.
As long as you have
and
the
then it
funds
just has
to-
an
You
appraise.
just gotta come up with the money.
Are
Yeah.
are you
it's gonna
thinking
happen.
about
I mean,
my
it-
condo?
or
No.
It doesn't have to, with the appraisal, it doesn't have to. appraise.
buying
As
it?
long
I'm
as
trying
the
to sell
client's
this
willing to
thing.
make up the gap.
Make up
Before I have to
the
list it.
It's 5% down on a conventional, right?
It's the minimum.
Minimum, so, okay, so they only put 5%.
But again, like a lot of boards have the right to approve the or the sale, and they want to look at the contract, and then they can make their own rules. So just because conventional loan says you only have to put 5% down, doesn't mean that the board itself doesn't have the authority to say, we're not okay with that,
Yeah,
Okay.
right? So there's just so many different people with their own set of rules.
One of my clients, I know Rony has the same thing where we're in like a 200,000 with one of our clients, and we're just getting beat out of every deal.
Yeah, I mean, you can always go over it, you just have to pay for it.
Yeah, but they have, then
But
they
they
stop
don't-
that cash.
Yeah, they don't-
And the problem is because
Mhm.
these HOAs aren't, really doing this reserve, like this just like, this $200,000.
If you're in 200,000 price range, you probably don't have
Like,
Correct.
20%
To
cash
put down, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like-
That's the problem.
It's like a
Yeah.
catch-22 on that,
Mhm.
So even when it comes to that, from my knowledge, you can still probably go up on price, but if it's like an HOA as opposed to like a condo association, it's a little bit different, right? Because with HOA, you don't need that 10%. Do you?
No, I mean, it's specific to condominium, so condominium has an HOA, but
It's different because it's a condo.
Yeah,
association.
fresh, yeah.
And, some of them, I've noticed a lot of like either villas or townhouses, they'll still associate as like
correct.
condo.
So it depends how it's registered. So
Yeah.
that all depends on whether or not they filed the declaration in the public records. So if they file a deck and have all of the layouts and everything and registered as a condo, then it's a condo, and it'll tell you so, even if it looks like a townhouse online,
yes.
it'll tell you so on the property
Be
appraiser. So
careful
that's
about
also
that.
something important to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, another way to look at that, if you're looking at the legal description.
Yeah,
'Cause the
Yes,
legal
it
description
says
will
the word
say
condo.
Yeah.
Townhouse or condo in there, and you'll be living like, but it's a townhouse, but no, it's a condo. and
It's
like-
It
governed
looks
by,
like a townhouse,
It looks
Yeah,
like a
it's
townhouse.
but the
governed.
developer decided to put it through as a condo.
yeah, because sometimes when you send a search to someone and suddenly a townhouse shows up and they're looking for a condo.
Yeah, and it's like, what? But it's
Technically a
very-
condo. Yeah.
It's just a different shape.
But they don't see it that way. It's like, why are you sending me a townhouse?
You didn't know those are the new condos?
Townhouse is a new condo.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all I got.
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, I'll send
Thank
this to everyone, just so
you.
you guys have it.
You're welcome.
Another
I
question?
want to know, like, what if listing agents don't have availability to a budget? Like you said, like, what if it's a really
That's why it's important to hunt the person.
Get the condo
You gotta hunt something
association's
down.
information and call them.
Yeah, but oftentimes they don't pick
I've
up,
gone
so
in
it's like
circles.
this,
Well, I
like,
know,
oh, yeah.
email
Or I
them.
called someone,
They
gave
say,
me the
call
right
this
one,
person,
and then I
call
called
this
another
person.
And I got the number for the first person.
She's like, why is it
And
ringing?
it's 2 days.
Call other agents that have listings in there too.
Yeah, I usually check the address. I look to see what's pending. and
Hi,
what's under
everybody.
Contract, because they would have, sometimes they have in the document section.